coverage of the SCO summit.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's look at the top headlines this hour. A fresh Israeli strike has hit Nasser Hospital in the Gaza Strip. At least 15 people have been killed in the attack, and there are also reports of the death of 4 journalists in the strikes. This comes after a wave of overnight strikes in the enclave. Russia's defense ministry has said that its forces have captured the village of Filia in Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region, even as Kiev's top commander reported Ukrainian troops recaptured 3 villages in Donetsk, while Lavrov has stated that he has outlined the terms for Ukraine. US National Guard troops in Washington will begin carrying M17 pistols or M4 rifles from Sunday night as part of President Donald Trump's crime crackdown, with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth authorizing the move. President Trump also suggested expanding troop deployments to Democratic-run cities like Chicago and Baltimore. Bangladesh Chief Advisor Mohammed Yunus has warned that Dhaka can no longer mobilize additional resources for the 1.3 million Rohingya refugees, urging global powers to deliver a sustainable solution. Nobel laureate Yunus presented 7 action points at a conference marking the 8th anniversary of the Rohingya exodus from Myanmar. France has summoned US Ambassador Charles Kushner after his Wall Street Journal letter accused Paris of failing to combat anti-Semitism and criticizing France's stance on Israel. However, President Macron has rejected the claims and has boosted security around synagogues and Jewish centers to avoid incidents linked to the Gaza conflict. Iran will hold nuclear talks with Britain, France, Germany and the European Union in Geneva tomorrow, according to local state media. This will be the second meeting since Iran's 12-day war with Israel in June, when the United States also struck Tehran's nuclear facilities. Cambodia's parliament has passed a law allowing the state to revoke citizenship of people convicted of treason, with 120 of 125 lawmakers voting in favour. The move comes amid a wider crackdown on opposition figures, many of whom have been jailed or forced into exile since the 2017 ban of the Cambodian National Rescue Party. Indonesia and the United States have launched joint military drills with allies from 11 countries today to last more than a week, highlighting growing defense cooperation in the region. The exercises aim to strengthen strategic partnerships amid rising geopolitical tensions. We start this hour with the Middle East, where Israeli strikes on Gaza's Nasser Hospital today killed at least 15 people, including 4 journalists. Let's listen in to some of the victims' relatives and what they had to say about the attack.
وهم نايمين يما ضربوا بالصواريخ وهم نايمين فقدت عيني كاملة.
هو بصلي علي صوتك بالله يحفظك.
هو بصلي يما هو بصلي اولاده راحوا 2 استشهدوا شافهم بعد 10 سنين. وواحد جاي نايم والمرأة رجليها وايديها بس ان شاء الله يا رب بسيطة يا رب. بهمش بالاخوي يضل مبتورة ايده بهمش بس يضل طيب يا رب.
هناك 4 شهداء من عائلة آل شلوب وهناك أكثر من 12 إصابة من نفس العائلة ويوجد عصابات كثيرة لا نعرف عددها ويوجد شهداء آخرين من عائلات أخرى ولكن تفاجأنا بحجم الإصابات وحجم الشهداء ولكن لا يوجد في هذا المكان أي خطر أمني على إسرائيل ولكن كلهم مدنيين. منطقة إنسانية آمنة بالكامل وهي بوابة أصداء الشمالية وجميع الناس متواجدين فيها وجميعهم من الشيوخ ومن الأطفال ومن النساء ومن الناس اللي باحثين عن أماكن الأمان لكي يجلسوا بهدوء في هذا المكان بخيمة لا تظلهم لا من شمس ولا تظلهم من حاولة تظلهم من شتاء.
Among the dead was Hussam Al-Masri, a cameraman, while a photographer, Hatem Khaled, was injured in a second strike that witnesses say hit as rescue workers and media crews rushed to the scene. 3 other journalists, Miriam Abu Daga, Mohammed Salama and Moaz Abu Taha, were also killed, along with a rescue worker. Reuters confirmed its live feed from the hospital operated by Masri cut off at the moment of the first strike. The Palestinian Journalist Syndicate says over 240 journalists have been killed in Gaza since October the 7th of 2023. We are now joined by Ali Mohammed Bushback, who is an independent Palestinian researcher, and he joins us live from Cairo to discuss this breaking story. Ali, tragic news coming out of the Gaza Strip. Israeli strikes kill 15 people, 4 of which are journalists. This has been the most deadly war in history for media persons. Those media persons, of course, being Palestinian journalists. Figures are differing from different agencies. However, they believe around 250 people have been killed that work in the media, reporting out of the Gaza Strip. Can you give us a bit more about the dangers for media persons, journalists working out of the enclave, and some of the risks that they face on a continued basis in this conflict?
Thank you, Thomas, for having me. Let me just highlight what happened today morning while Israel targeted the roof of a building in Nasser Hospital complex in Khan Yunis, a south part of Gaza. That the civil defense and also the journalist went to cover the situation, and subsequently Israel by suicide drone targeted the people who gather, among of them civilians, among of them journalists, 4 journalists, and also the medical staff, and also no doubt about the civil defense team that's created a tragic events and horrifying events. Several of civilians have been killed in this assassination, in this targeting and bombardment. Thomas, it's worth mentioning that the human rights rapporteur in Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese, she condemned what is happening among of the widespread condemnation from the international community that Palestinian journalists should be protected. It's also worth mentioning that, Thomas, there is in a plus 972 magazine, there is an Israeli writer. He revealed that there is a special forces and a special cell in Israeli's army that it's called a legitimization cell. It's working under the unit 200 that it's finding a justification to targeting the civilians and targeting journalists. This cell, it's a duty to find any excuses by killing the Palestinian journalist on the ground. And also most of these people who got killed during this event or during the traumatic events, most of them are journalists and social media activists who revealed the brutal of this war. Palestinian journalists, they couldn't find any protective. They are under the Israelis' attack. There is no limitation for the Israelis' attack while they are suffering from the continuous trauma, and Israel continuously treating them by calling them, and they are treating them. They are going to kill them and their families, and also several of Palestinian journalists has been
Ali.
killed.
Ali, of course, I just wanted to say that Israel has not yet given a formal response. This is being covered by the world media. Of course, people are going to be outraged by this. Your thoughts on how Israel might respond to this? Of course, 15 people, 4 journalists killed, bombed in a hospital, is going to outrage many across the world. How do you think Israel is going to go around their statements in regards to this strike that they have committed today?
Thomas, it's worth mentioning that the day before yesterday, also Palestinian cameraman Khaled Al-Madhoun, he got killed also during his coverage, but unfortunately the international media, they didn't cover his story. That's also that's happened the day before yesterday. The Israeli justification, it will be the same justification vacation while Israel assassinated Shireen Abu Akleh in West Bank while she went covered the situation. The same things when Israel killed Hussein Slayeh, who used to Israel assassinated him while he was in the hospital bed a couple of months back. And they are claiming that he used to cover the situation during the 7th of October and he crossed the border between Gaza and Israel. So Israel doesn't care because it's acting impunity and above the international law and above the morale. It's all about audacity, Thomas. Israel, now that they will find any excuses. That the same, it's not the first journalist who got killed and assassinated since the beginning of Second Intifada 2000 up to date. Journalists have been targeted deliberately by Israeli forces and Israelis airstrike.
Ali, do stay with us. We have further updates from West Asia. We move on now. Israel says it is ready to support Lebanon's efforts to disarm Hezbollah. The statement follows a Lebanese cabinet decision backing a US disarmament plan. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said Israel could reduce its military presence if the Lebanese army begins implementing the plan. The roadmap, submitted by US envoy Tom Barak, is the most detailed proposal yet. Hezbollah has rejected previous calls to disarm. Hours after Netanyahu's comments, an Israeli drone strike reportedly killed one person near Tebnine, according to reports. The IDF has not responded to these strikes at this present time. We are now once again joined by Ali Abushbak. Ali, your thoughts on both Israel's and the United States' plans in order to get Hezbollah, the Iran-backed proxy group, to disarm. Hezbollah have rejected calls to disarm previously. Can I get your analysis about the relationship, the current relationship with both the Israeli and the United States and with the Lebanese government here, and how they're going to work together in attempting to make this happen?
Thomas, it's worth mentioning that Hezbollah is a part of Lebanon's government, and Hezbollah, by his leadership nowadays, he confirmed that he's under the order of the government. But while the government decided to disarm Hezbollah denied lie down his weapon because considered Israel will targeting them, and Israel it's going to occupy the South part of Lebanon without any defense. So also after the throw over the Al-Assad regime, Hezbollah, he becomes so much weak than before, and his troop on the ground, it's especially after the Bejar attack, they got a hard lesson from the Israel. But on the ground, Hezbollah still resist, and I guess it's Hezbollah won't lie down its weapon. They consider it as a legitimate resistance for the Israelis, a violation on the ground. So that will escalate the situation. And I guess I asked one of my Lebanese friend that is Lebanon in the brink of a civil war if Hezbollah is not going to lie its weapon. So he confirmed that Hezbollah will go to seize the capital of Lebanon, Beirut, and if they are pressurizing Hezbollah to lie the weapons.
Ali, thank you very much as always. Pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you for giving those insights on the West Asian region. We now, however, move over to Europe, where Russia claims new gains in Ukraine. On Monday, its defense ministry announced the capture of Zaporizhzhia, a village in the Dnipropetrovsk region. This marks a deeper push into Ukrainian territory as peace talks remain stalled. It's the first reported Russian advance into the region since the war began over 3 years ago. The move signals growing pressure on Ukrainian defences in the east. Meanwhile, fighters battled large blazes in Sumy after overnight Russian strikes. Ukraine has yet to confirm the loss of the village as fighting intensifies. Diplomatic efforts remain frozen with no signs of a breakthrough in sight. We're now joined by Major General Gigi Dawedi, who is a global strategic defense expert, and he joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us, Major General. I first want to get your insight on the situation on the battlefield currently. We know that Russia reportedly controls approximately 20% of Ukrainian territory. That has been maintained for a couple of months now. It seems like the diplomatic negotiations, that has been stalled with minimal Russian advances. However, they are still advancing into Ukrainian territory. Your thoughts on what's going on the ground right now in regards to the direct conflict?
Well, presently, the Ukrainian-Russian conflict is in a state of almost stalemate, but the tactical battles are going on, and the Russian effort is to make small gains as possible to improve the position, because the talks, while peace talks are up in the air, but I don't think President Putin is very serious to negotiate a settlement until his conditions are met. Those conditions are that he wants complete Donbass, he wants the demilitarization of Ukraine. So all that is on the agenda. But the point is that on the ground, tactical battles are going on, small gains are being made, but that is coming at a big cost. So the issue is that both these sides are today locked up in a, I would say, meat grinder type of war, in which the small gains are being made, but these gains are actually tactical, but they have strategic significance because that adds on to the real estate. And today what Russia is fighting for is to gain as much real estate as possible. So these tactical battles are going on while the talks are on, the peace talks are in the air. But I don't think that it's going to end anytime soon. And these tactical battles will go on, and each village or each, I would say, kilometer ground gain is actually counted toward the success, and that's what President Putin is looking at, that he wants to improve his bargaining position on the table and capture as much territory as possible. And you rightly said, today Russia controls about 20% of the Ukrainian territory, but their claims are almost up to 30%, because if he gets Donbass complete, then it will almost come to 30%.
Yes, Major General. Now let's move on to some diplomatic updates. The German Finance Minister and Vice Chancellor Lars Klingbeil has made a visit to Kiev, reaffirming that Germany's support for Ukraine remains strong. He warned Russian President Vladimir Putin against thinking Germany's aid could wane, calling Germany Ukraine's second largest supporter globally and largest in Europe. Klingbeil urged Putin to engage in the peace process, emphasizing that Ukraine must participate in negotiations. He said lasting peace requires a ceasefire and reliable security guarantees, noting close international coordination to achieve this. At the same time, Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr arrived in Kiev, where he was greeted by Ukrainian officials at the central railway station, underlining continued international support amid Europe's bloodiest war in 80 years. We are once again joined by Major General Gigi Dawedi. Major General, of course, the European support for Ukraine continues. How important has that been since the Trump administration has come into power?
Well, Trump administration is President Trump 2.0. In fact, he was very emphatic that there has to be a ceasefire and there has to be end of hostilities between Ukraine and Russia, and that's what was his poll flag or poll promise. And therefore, when he assumed the power a second time, he was very keen that the war must end, but that hasn't. And in fact, he tried to coerce Ukrainian president, and he also gave a threat that they will stop the military aid. But I think there have been rethink on part of President Trump, and after the talks at Alaska, he quite knows that Putin is not going to agree to ceasefire anytime soon. So therefore, new mechanism is being worked out by America and Europe to extend as much military aid as possible. And 2 days back, the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney was there during the celebration of Ukrainian Independence Day, and also the other European leaders have actually come together to ensure that Ukraine gets the weapon system they require to defend themselves. And they had, in fact, promised Germany and Norway have promised that Ukraine will get 2 batteries of Patriot missiles. They'll get the additional air defense systems. So, in summarize, I would say that now Europe and America are actually together to help out Ukrainians to
Yes.
fight the war and to defend themselves. And this promise by the German foreign minister is only the strengthening the case in point. And as long as Ukraine gets the weapon system, they get the support, I think they'll fight on, they'll not succumb to the Russian pressure. But without European and American support, Ukraine cannot last for very long.
Thank you very much, Major General Gigi Dawedi, for joining us here on NewsX World. Pleasure to get your insight. We now move on once again. Bangladesh's interim leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner Muhammad Yunus has called on the international community to help end the ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya minority in neighbouring Myanmar. Speaking at an aid conference in Cox's Bazar, Yunus highlighted the immense burden Bangladesh carries, hosting 1.3 million Rohingya refugees, the largest refugee population in the world. Most fled Myanmar following a military crackdown in 2017. Yunus stressed that Bangladesh cannot shoulder the responsibility alone. He said that it is not only Bangladesh's duty, but also the responsibility of the international community to share the burden of the Rohingya crisis. He also highlighted the strain on Bangladesh, which is still recovering from the August 2024 uprising that overthrew the government of Sheikh Hasina. While Bangladesh is working tirelessly to support the refugees, Yunus emphasized that the root of the crisis lies in Myanmar. The aid talks in Cox's Bazar come ahead of a United Nations conference on the Rohingya crisis scheduled for September the 30th in New York. We are joined now by Noor Aziza, and she is part of the Rohingya Maya Funyo network, and she joins us live from Jakarta. Thank you very much for joining us, Noor. Could you give us a bit of a rundown of the strain that has been put on Bangladesh since all these refugees have come into the country, and the sort of strain that it does put in on their government, and the job that the government of Bangladesh has done for the world's largest refugee population so far?
We, as the Rohingya community, are extremely grateful for what the government of Bangladesh has done, hosting the largest refugee camp in the world, around 1.2 million Rohingya refugees. I got to visit my community about 2 months ago, and the situation is extremely dire. There are more than 500,000 Rohingya children in the camp that do not have access to any formal education. Due to the global humanitarian funding cuts, we've seen that more than 6,500 learning centers have completely shut. So when I was there, it was completely heartbreaking, entering the camp, seeing children trying to do whatever they can to make sure that they keep busy. But right now, what we are seeing is the ongoing displacement of Rohingya, because the genocide of Rohingya continues. It did not stop in 2017. It has continued. And we've seen more than 120,000 Rohingya refugees flee in the last year and a half alone. And unfortunately, a safe repatriation does not exist today because constant bombing and constant killing is still happening.
Noor, Muhammad Yunus did stress that Bangladesh cannot carry this burden alone. What concrete steps should the international community take now, financially, diplomatically, or militarily, to ease this pressure?
We need a new funding model. We need to explore new funding models where Rohingya refugees don't have to rely on humanitarian aid, because we know that humanitarian aid can decrease. Right now, Rohingya refugees are receiving $12 a month for food rations. And we know that $12 a month is nothing. People are living on 20 cents a day. Therefore, people are making that life-threatening journey towards Indonesia and Malaysia. In the last year and a half alone, UNHCR stated that 650 bodies are missing or dead making that sea journey. And so what we also need to do is ensure that we are holding perpetrators accountable. We are holding the military junta and other ethnic armed groups that are also conducting genocide and killings against Rohingya accountable. We, more than anything, want to go back home to our ancestral homeland. I've been very lucky and very privileged. I fled in the 90s and I was living in exile in Malaysia for quite a while, and now I'm an Australian citizen because I seek asylum there. But I'm part of the 1% that live in freedom. There are 3 million Rohingya and only 1% live in freedom. So I guess to say is we want to go back home, but right now it's not safe to do so. But we need to hold perpetrators accountable in order for us to go back home, because we cannot go back to death.
Noor, I want to go back to something you pressed on briefly there, accountability. The root of the crisis, of course, remains in the country of Myanmar. Following the earthquake, we actually saw some diplomatic weight be introduced to the military junta, with him being attending conferences, etc., being recognized by certain leaders around the world. What leverage, if any, does the global community have to hold Myanmar's military accountable for what Yunus calls ethnic cleansing?
We need to place sanctions against the Myanmar military, and we also need to allow for the transactions of banks to be declined. And unfortunately, neighboring countries such as ASEAN countries are allowing for these bank transfers to occur. And we know that the Myanmar military make the most money out of gas and oil, and that's their biggest business. And ASEAN countries have failed Rohingya, and the genocide of Rohingya have continued because we are not holding the military accountable. We are saying, hello, yes, let's do business. Let's keep your money alive. Let's do transactions. So we need to actually put words into action.
Thank you very much, Noor, for joining us. Pleasure to speak to you and get your insight on that topic. We now move on and we move over to Australia, where the lone surviving guest of a lunch where 3 others died after being served food laced with deadly mushrooms told an Australian court that the actions of host and convicted murderer Erin Patterson had left him feeling half alive. Patterson was found guilty last month of luring her mother-in-law, father-in-law, and Gail's sister, Heather Wilkinson, to lunch at her home and poisoning them with individual portions of beef Wellington that contained toxic death cap mushrooms. A jury also found the 50-year-old guilty of attempted murder. Heather's husband, who survived the 2023 meal at Erin Patterson's home in Longitha. The seriousness of her offences meant Patterson's sentence could only be life imprisonment, her own barrister said during a pre-sentencing hearing. Well, that is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you.